Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to welcome you to our webinar, Supporting Survivors of Incarceration and Gender-Based Violence, a discussion with authors and contributors to the LOVE curriculum for providers. My name is Samantha. My pronouns are she, they, ella, ella. I have the honor of kicking us off today. And while we'll all introduce ourselves a little bit more deeply as we engage in our conversations, I get to really quickly introduce the LOVE Project team that's on the call today. So Robin and Angel are part of the LOVE Project Subject Matter Experts Advisory Group. Sydney, April, Celine, Jesse, and I are all part of the LOVE Planning Team, along with folks from Young Women's Freedom Center, the National Black Women's Justice Institute, and others who have joined us over the years. There are 4 additional subject matter experts, Nikki, Kiana, Kimmy, and Patrice, who were unable to join us today, but have been a core part of this LOVE team and our critical work together. So I want to be sure that I name them, even though they can't be with us here today. So for our webinar today, some of us will be behind the scenes, some of us will be participating in and moderating our discussions. And Carrie has joined us to help us navigate our technology. So thanks, Carrie, for managing all of that for us. I will be covering a few housekeeping items before we jump into our conversation. If you haven't yet, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We just got that turned on. We would love to hear where you all are joining from. We will share the webinar recording and slides with you all next week. They will also be available on our National Crittenton website, along with a curriculum, which we will post after the call today. For those of you joining by computer who want to turn your captions on and off, you can do so by clicking the live transcript or show captions feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen in the control panel. And if you have questions, please submit them to us using the Q&A feature. We'll try to answer them as we can throughout the session, and there's some dedicated time at the end. You're also welcome to use the chat feature to connect with each other throughout the session, but definitely submit the questions through the Q&A to make it a little bit easier for us to keep track. And then finally, at the end, we have a survey that we would love for you to fill out. We'd love to get your feedback on the session and the presentation and everything we cover. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out for us, we would really appreciate it. So that's it for housekeeping items. I'll see y'all in a little bit, but I'm going to pass it to Angel in the meantime.
Thanks, Samantha. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is Angel. As Samantha said, I am one of the LOVE subject matter experts. I use she, her pronouns. And I am based in Brooklyn, New York on Lenape Canarsie land. Super excited to have all y'all here. So I just want to give a brief overview of what our next hour or so will look like. We are going to briefly describe the LOVE project that we've been working on for so long and the LOVE curriculum for providers, which we hope will be especially useful to y'all. And we hope to do that by engaging in discussions, as you can see on the slide, about gender-based violence, incarceration, services, and advocacy, which we hope will be a very, organic conversation that folks can learn a lot from us about as far as this process goes. And then we also want to describe some of the activities that we came up with in the training curriculum, how they were developed, why we think they're important, and how they can be useful in your work. So we hope that this will be very informative for y'all and very resourceful. And I will pass it back to you, Samantha.
Thanks, Angel. So as I mentioned before, I am Samantha Lopez. My pronouns are she, they, ella, ella. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I'm Vice President of National Organizing at National Crittenton, and I've had the honor of being a part of this incredible LOVE team that we brought together over the years. The LOVE Project, I'm going to just touch on a little bit about the LOVE Project and some of the work that we did together before we jump into having these discussions around the work and the curriculum that we've developed. So the LOVE Project was funded in 2018 by the Office on Violence Against Women. The project was sustained by a really deep partnership and collaboration between National Crittenton, the National Black Women's Justice Institute, Young Women's Freedom Center, and our group of subject matter experts. the folks who I've mentioned already. And we were also fortunate to get to work with folks from the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, who were critical to launching the work and the project at the beginning, as we were kind of planning what we were going to be doing. This funding allowed us to develop the Leadership of Voices of Experience project, the LOVE project, which centers the experience of incarceration and gender-based violence. And a significant part of this project included a process of information gathering where we engaged in listening sessions with survivors of gender-based violence and incarcerations. We had discussions with a variety of service providers, including those working in domestic violence and sexual assault services and coalitions. And we reviewed a bunch of relevant research and data that informed our process of development through the curriculum. And these discussions really led us to these four main intersecting threads that you heard Angel mention, and that we'll talk about a little bit more deeply in our next discussion, which are the topics of advocacy, incarceration, gender-based violence, and service access and delivery. And the LOVE project team was really able to take the learnings from all of these discussions and create some training activities that can serve as a resource for advocates, for victim service providers, for other stakeholders who are working with folks who are currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, including women, girls, and gender expansive people. So on that note, I'm going to pass the mic to April to guide us through the next section that really dives into a discussion about these topics.
Hello, I'm sorry, my video won't start right now. I do not know why. Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm April. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am the policy associate with the Young Women's Freedom Center. I am a formerly incarcerated person who served over 17 years in the world's largest women's institution in California, and I'm also a criminalized survivor. I've been home for 17 years, my apologies. I've been home for 7 years and grateful to work on the LOVE project and from the work that I do at the Young Women's Freedom Center. So I've been on this project, I want to say, for about 2.5, 3 years. And it's been a journey, but really grateful that we're here and that we're able to bring this curriculum as well as these wonderful subject matter experts to you all. And so I'd like to turn it over to Robin so that she can introduce herself as well.
Okay, my video won't start either. But good afternoon. My name is Robin. Okay, there we go. Sorry. My name is Robin Hassan. I am the executive director with Women on the Rise here in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been incarcerated for 10 years and I've been home for 2.5 years. And I will say that the LOVE project, this is the first project that I started working on when I gained my freedom. It was such a welcoming experience to talk to other formerly incarcerated women, to know that I've only been out at that time less than 6 months and see what they were achieving and what they were doing. And it just gave me a sense of knowing that that was possible. And then also to take the experience that I've had and to be able to bring it to the forefront to know that it's being addressed and how it can be corrected. So being a part of this program was very enlightening to me, very inspiring to me. So I really do appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you. Angel, will you also please take a few seconds to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hi y'all. I was just talking a few moments ago, so hopefully y'all remember me. My name's Angel. I use she, her pronouns. I currently work at Envision Freedom Fund. I am the program coordinator for a program called Court Watch New York City. Previously, I worked with the Steps to End Family Violence, which Our co-love subject matter expert, Patrice, is co-director of, and I worked at the Criminalized Survivors Program where me and my coworkers would do advocacy on behalf of survivors who were criminalized, being prosecuted pre-trial, to try to help with their cases, to try to free folks. And that's really what brought me to this project. Thank you, April.
Thank you. And so, as everybody can see, there's a reason why we all are doing this work. But I think that we should go a little bit more into like the work and like what like actually brings us here, aside from just our lived experience, because I believe that this work is a heart condition. It's a heart condition work, and it's work that you have to show up every day to do. Because for one, the population is a special needs population, and for two, the work gets hard. And so like for me, I show up every day, particularly because I know I left behind a lot of people who are very, very, very amazing, dope, brilliant people, who don't really have a voice. Like they're behind these walls and they don't have a voice. And for me, I was a person who didn't have an advocate and who didn't have a voice. And you see a lot of times people, like while you're serving your time, you see a lot of people left inside and people are forgotten about. And for me, it was really important that I never turned my back on the people who are incarcerated, or anybody incarcerated, male, female, child, it doesn't matter. Solely because I was a person who's had many backs turned on them, because people are judgmental and we make our own decisions about people based off of our biases that we have been raised with. And that doesn't always mean that that is the truth, what you believe. It's your opinion that was formed, and it could have been formed from a place of negativity or somebody else's dislike or disdain for a population, or and our country is racist. So I mean, that's another reason why it's really important that we get to know people, and we, you know, we don't turn our backs on people and we show up. And so like right now I do a lot of policy work. I do a lot of policy work for survivors. I do a lot of policy work that helps people have holistic journeys through the criminal system, because we know that the cards are stacked against people of color. And people from poor demographics. And so like, that's really, aside from my lived experience, why I show up. I show up because people need a voice. And I've decided that, well, God decided, and I chose to say, okay, that I was gonna be a voice for the voiceless. So Robin or Angel, at different times, if you guys would like to really talk more in depth on why you chose this path, and how do you show up daily, and what keeps you motivated to show up in the right way, with the right heart condition?
Well, for me, it's similar to what you were saying, April, is during my 10 years of incarceration, I met a lot of amazing women who just did not have the resources that they need to prevent them to have been incarcerated in the first place. A lot of people that are experiencing things that they didn't know how to deal with, and they didn't have the help in how to deal with. And so it's just a lot of things that I saw was missing from the system that is broken. Growing up, I never had any kind of touch with the criminal justice system. So I'm the first person in my family to be in touch by incarceration. So this was new to me. And then with the idea of growing up thinking jails and prisons were one way, and then finding out the truth through my own experience, it let me know that what I grew up with, and what a lot of people that's never been touched by incarceration don't really know the actual truth about what's going on behind those walls. So I feel like it was our duty for the ones who have come home to let people know what is actually going on, how it is not helping people, how it is actually hindering people, the experiences that go on that people don't address behind the walls, that things that happen out here in the community that, you know, would be addressed. So it's just like, this is a forgotten world. It's really a world into itself inside of there. So I really got into this work to make sure that people know that inside that I left, that people don't come home and just forget, that it is something that actually sticks with you. I'm very surprised that people who can come home from incarceration and go on about their lives like that this doesn't happen, or it didn't matter. But I really feel like it's something that's rooted down, because I'm a big believer that prison is trauma, and that it's something that people just don't address, but it still will peek its head out from time to time. So that's why I got into this work, to let people know that there has to be a better way to address issues for people that are in need.
Thank you. Angel, would you please give us some insight for you?
Yes, I think for me, I came to this work specifically through more of like the gender-based violence lens, and then I really like I come from, marginalized communities. I'm from Detroit. As a Black woman, I mean, my family, my communities have been touched by these issues, but I have never, been in the system myself. So I was coming from the gender-based violence sphere when I first started working at Steps, which was my first time ever going into jails and working with that many people. And I think the benefit, especially of seeing so many different cases, was seeing just like the like unlimited amount of ways that women or survivors generally end up in the system. I think a lot of us, or I'll speak for myself, prior to being exposed to that many people's cases, I had thought there was maybe one or two ways to end up. I think a lot of people are familiar with like Marissa Alexander, like, the gunshot, things like that. But there's just so many other ways that people end up in the system based on gender-based violence. And I think it caused me to really like step back my scope and really think on a larger scale, like what the system does. I think loved what Robin said about, thinking about prisons and jails as one thing, and then coming to learn that like, oh, this is actually causing harm to survivors. Like most of the women that I met on Rikers were survivors. And I think especially as a service provider, I feel like many service providers are in this space where you have a lot of like power over the people that you're working with, because at the end of the day you can go home, like you have access to a lot of things that folks inside don't. And then on the other side there's like power that you're kind of wrestling with, whether that's judges, DAs, attorneys, whoever. And I think that like would take a hold on me sometimes, feeling like you're in this position where you have power but not enough. And I think like what really keeps me going in this work, what has kept me going in this work for this amount of years, and what I fall back on, is that it's not going to be just me, right? Like tackling the like mass incarceration, or just one person inside that is like really doing advocacy, that it really is a group effort. And I think that's really what led me to the job I have now in Court Watch, where I have more of a like I play more of an advocacy role, as opposed to just doing direct service. And I think that allows me a bigger platform, able to speak more freely because I don't have to worry about, retaliation and things like that. And I love like being in this work and being able to be that voice, because so many people inside are limited on what they can say, because they have many people that I worked with at least had open cases, and there is so much retaliation. But as a service provider, as an advocate, you can, I think what you were saying, April, like not even to really give people a voice, but amplify their voice, or, be cover to what they want to say. And I think that's what really keeps me going, is like remembering that it's a group effort and we all have a role in it. And it doesn't have to just be on me or on one person inside who's advocating, or on one organization.
I'm glad you said that. It takes me back to my mentor when I first started doing this work, and she was like, "This is a relay. It's not a sprint." And knowing that you're going to have to pass a torch, and you might not see some of the changes that you want to see during your time of the work that you do, and like over the, especially like doing a lot of policy work. Like if anybody does policy, you know that you can work on a policy this year and then it gets amended and you have to come back next year and then next year. And some bills have taken us 10 years to get passed in California. So really realizing that it does take us all, and no one person can change or undo or abolish or fix or whatever lens everybody views the system and their role and how they want to, I was gonna use the word attack, but I'm not, how they want to help fix the system. It's all different, and it does take us all. And it's funny, when I first started this work, it took me about a year and a half after I came home to do this work. And I didn't even know that this was possible. Like I didn't know that we could come home and we could be successful and thrive, and we could be advocates. I thought we had to work these horrible minimum wage, 5 minimum wage jobs to survive. And like I was introduced to this work and I was like, wow, like I would love everybody that's coming home to do this work because it's so empowering and it gives you opportunity and actually a platform to help your other brothers and sisters have platform and, agency. But I think back to this is a relay, it's not a sprint. And this work is for everybody if they have the right heart condition and they want to do it. So it takes me to my next thing that I want to talk about is survivor-led advocacy and like what does survivor-led advocacy personally mean to me. Um, and now that I've been doing it for a while now, and I've created a nice platform and a nice space for myself. Survivor-led advocacy for me now is giving that to the people who I'm representing or to my other coworkers that I work with who might not have access to what I have access to. Like really just building their social capital, being a person that for one stood on the forefront and was really vulnerable while telling my story and talking about conditions and fighting a system that isn't always I don't say that isn't always fighting a system that isn't fair or that people don't understand how unfair or how unjust it is to the degree that I know it to be. And standing on the forefront of that. And so now, like I said, I love being able to pass the torch and I love being able to create space so that somebody can come stand next to me and tell their truth and tell their story. So that when the people on the inside see the newspaper articles or they see the news and they see like we're out here fighting for them, like me being a survivor that has created space for other survivors. That's really what I do. That's how I like to do the work. Making sure that we're not exploiting people by telling their stories for them, but creating space for them to tell their story. I don't know. So what does that mean to you? I'll ask you, Angel, first. Like, what does survivor-led advocacy mean to you? Being that you are a service provider and you are a person that is fighting for people, but also knowing that the people that you're fighting for don't always have a voice or don't even know that they can be an advocate for themselves or lead movement for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, like you're hitting the nail on the head that like really making sure that it's not an exploitative dynamic, because I feel like so often with social service providers, social services generally, like things do feel exploitative. A survivor will have to tell this, one of the most traumatic, some of the most terrible things that have ever happened to them, and they're having to like prove themselves and tell this traumatic story and bear this trauma in order to get services or in order to elicit, sympathy. And so I feel like survivor-led advocacy is really, really heavy on the survivor-led part. So I think that looks like really deferring to whoever's story it is. How do they want to tell this story? How do they identify themselves? Like what outlets make the most sense to them? And I think as advocates who, when it's not our case or when it's not our story to tell, I think our role is making resources available to survivors, right? Because folks know what they want to say. Folks know their own story. Folks are, as we would say at STEPS, the experts of their own lives. And it's just a matter of, as a service provider, we have resources, whether that's we, know about grants, or we know about, employment opportunities, or we have press contacts, or, we know people in certain circles, elected officials. Those are, things that we make open, those are tools that we offer up to survivors. But I think the emphasis on the survivor led is that they are the ones, driving the boat, making the decisions, and really being the leaders. And then when it comes a point where, because sometimes in my experience in defense campaigns, folks might be like, this case is stressing me out and I don't want to make any more decisions, then as an advocate, then it is your responsibility to then make those decisions in order to make sure that person can rest. So to me, survivor-led advocacy is so heavy on survivor-led because many advocates or service providers, can, whether inadvertently or subconsciously, feel like paternalistic or feel like I know better, I know something more than the folks who are actually going through it, when it really should be a way more of, being led by whoever's most impacted, or, being of service to that person, or, leading that person to things that you have access to, rather than telling them how to tell their story or what they should be doing.
Robin, it's your turn. No, you're okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump right in there. What I would say, what we've really dealt with here in the South, in Atlanta, is that we are the only formerly incarcerated all staff here in Atlanta. And so what we have is a lot of other organizations who do this work, have the passion for this work, but don't have anyone on their staff or just want to get more information. They always come to us because it's like they want to know how we feel about a certain thing. And so to me, that's like, for us, we'll have to go through the things that we went through. We're leading the mission of things that other organizations are trying to do. And then it also gives us the opportunity to know that we're being heard about things that we know is important to us or things that affect us. And what we do, Women on the Rise, as well, is we have an organization inside the prisons to empower the women inside. So like April was saying, getting people to tell their story. We know that sometimes it is traumatizing to do so, but we try to find a way to show them how empowering that is as well. It was very difficult for me when I came home to talk about things that I went through my incarceration. And after a while of talking about it so much, it's like I was able to own it. And it wasn't something that overtook me every single time. It wasn't something that I could be ashamed of as well. It was something that made me stronger about, look at what I survived. So I think when we let women that we left behind in prison know, telling your story is way more empowering in doing this work. And when you fight in this work to fight for change, it really helps you know that you're fighting a system that caused you the harm in the first place. And that doing that right there is being able to help start the healing process for people.
Thank you. We did a lot of work on this curriculum and making sure that we provided space for survivors as well as providers. And when I think about the work for a lot of my direction, like was about providers. Like I worked with the survivors too, or people who were directly impacted, but making sure we created a space to be able to educate providers was really important for me. And so like now that I take a step back and I think about like, what would I want providers to know? If I could tell them anything about working with survivors of incarceration or people who have survived gender-based violence or human trafficking, like what could I tell them specifically to where they would work well with the population? Because I always go back to, this is a heart condition, and like you really have to show up for work a certain way, especially because this is like I said, a special needs population, and you have chosen specifically to work with this population. And so like me, I'm a survivor, a criminalized survivor of human trafficking. I'm a person who was not recognized, still not recognized by the state as a survivor of human trafficking. And when I show up in space, I show up not trusting a provider. I show up not knowing what their motives are. I show up wondering if it's a safe space for me. I show up wondering, are they going to protect me? Are they going to advocate for me? Are my needs going to be met? As a person who has survived incarceration, I show up wondering, like, do I get the chance to be seen as me? Or do you see a felon? Do you see a label? Do you see a person who, oh, they deserve to be in jail, they deserve to be in prison, they deserve whatever they got coming? Do you see a person who should only be able to have a minimum wage job? Or do you see a person who deserves to be an active member of the community? Do you see a person who deserves to have a great career as well as access to finances and access to nice housing and nice community, and not just be placed into like a ghetto with a food desert without having access to the things that I need to survive and thrive? And so for me, like to talk to a provider, it's like knowing that people are struggling when they're coming to these sorry for my computer. People are struggling when they're coming to your services because maybe they're court ordered, maybe they were sent by their parole agent, maybe who knows how they landed there. But just as you are meeting this person for the first time, that might be the first time that they've met a person who might care about them, who might actually want to hear them and see them for who they are as a human, not as a label. And so really take your time to not be judgmental, to get to know this person and to actually help them, because so many times we come into these organizations where we're just a dollar. Like, it's about the funding. These nonprofits have become industrial complexes to where it's about the dollar. So don't make it about the dollar with them. Make it about the person, because you could ultimately change the whole trajectory of their life, and they could now have opportunity and have a chance that they wouldn't have had prior to you. So like, if I could say anything, give them a chance and know that they come with, we come scared. We come with some trust issues because the system has failed us, and most often a lot of these organizations fail us too because it's about the dollar. And so you, Angel, as a provider, like, if you could tell providers as well, like, what they should know working with this population as a provider that shows up with the correct heart condition, and knowing what you battle with and what you struggle with daily to try to provide help to a population that might not be able to always articulate their needs correctly, but still knowing that that they have a need that needs to be met.
Definitely. Yeah. I think like the two most important values to have are like respect for autonomy and also transparency. Because I mean, definitely, I think one of the biggest overlaps between people who have been in, abusive relationships and folks who have survived incarceration is that they've gotten their freedom, their control, their autonomy taken away from them, whether from whoever the abusive person in the dynamic was, whether from the government, the state, the system. And so as a service provider, I think the number one most important thing is to always respect someone's autonomy and intelligence. When someone is coming to you for something, they already have an idea of what they might want. Maybe you have an idea of a larger picture and you can offer those options up and you can explain things to folks. But I always feel like as a service provider, you should be deferring to the person that is the one that actually needs help, because at the end of the day, they're the person that's going to be living with whatever comes out of it, whether it's an employment program, whether it's housing, whether it's a case outcome, whatever it is, they are the ones that are going to have to be living with that. And so I think respecting people's autonomy and what they want and what they're considering, someone's decision making doesn't always have to make sense for you in order for you to help them, because maybe there's something they don't want to tell you, but that they're accounting for. And you have to be able to respect that folks folks know what's going on in their lives and that they have an idea of what's good for them. And then I think transparency on the other end, because there is such a lack of, and there is, like you said, there is a lot of distrust. And there is a lot of, things that go on where folks don't always trust service providers. So being honest, and a lot of people can understand, what you're working with. If you tell folks, oh, there is this thing that I have to do, but maybe we can work around this, or I can't make any promises that this will happen, but I'll try my best, and following up. Especially when folks are inside, you're always left hanging, right? Whether you're pre-trial and you just don't know what the DA is doing, you don't know what's going on with your case, how long you're going to be sitting there, whether you're upstate and you're wondering what's going on with parole, or maybe you're trying to appeal your case, or you're wondering what's going on with your family. Communication and transparency is always important, because that is really how you build trust, especially with service providers, people who are mandated reporters, right? Nobody wants to randomly find out their service provider reported them to, law enforcement. So I think transparency to build trust, and also respect of autonomy, because again, you don't want to be that paternalistic service provider that thinks that what's best for someone that you're just now meeting.
What I feel is basically the same with already what April has reiterated, but when you are incarcerated or in parole, probation, or whatever the case may be, building that trust is very difficult, because we have come from an environment where we didn't trust anyone, be it your fellow person that you're detained with, authority. You just learn to not trust anyone around you that has your best interest. I know there's plenty of times I went to plenty of groups, and a lot of the time at the beginning when I was in denial, you just want to have something to do, so you're not looking for something to actually help you, or something to actually, someone to actually be there for you. But then when you get to a certain point where you see this person is showing up, this person is giving you good information that you actually can see that is useful to you, you start developing a trust with them. And then when people see that you actually see that you care, and that it's just a job for you, I've seen that people also gain trust that way as well. is a lot of the times when you walk into the situation when people are incarcerated, it's good to see someone that's coming in there and offering them information and offering them from what we call the free world. But the thing is, to build that trust for me to open up, I have to find something to relate to you. To me, once I found people that I related to say, okay, I am in this situation right now being incarcerated, but you did the same thing I did on the outside, or you're a mother just like me, or you're an auntie just like me, and I found a way to connect with you. That is when I was more open or more acceptable to take any kind of assistance from anybody. And that's when the trust would be able to let me really express what I really needed to be okay. Because as Angel said, when we're waiting on parole, we're just on edge about everything. And so that's all our mind is really focused on, is every day being called for legal mail to see if you've heard anything. So your mind is not really focused on anything else outside of that. For building trust and finding something relatable to someone so they can see you're not the same as what they deal with every day, I think is the key.
So I want to address, thank you, Robin and Angel. I want to address some stuff in the chat that we've been getting. And so Marissa said that it's been mentioned that sympathy can come across as pity in system interactions. And for me, so there's sympathy and there's empathy. And so when I think about somebody pitying me, it's like a puppy, like, oh, poor thing, or oh, if only, or I wish. Like, it's all about tone and delivery. And like, how are you viewing me? Are you viewing me as a person that, oh, poor baby? Or are you viewing me as a person that just needs some help and a chance? Like, because that's all anybody needs is a chance. And so like, if you can see the situation from more of an empathetic place to where you can try to understand what they've been through, then I think that's how, how you would deal with that, versus like feeling sorry for a person. Like, don't feel sorry for me. Like, life happened and life was horrible, and things could have been done better, and people probably could have protected me better, and I probably could have made better choices. But at the same time, we all have the will to overcome. We all have the strength to overcome. And with the right systems in place and the right people in your corner and your support system, you definitely can. So I think it's about tone and delivery, and like, how are you viewing this person? Do you view this person as a whole human being, or do you view this person as a victim? I think for me, I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on that. Sympathy versus empathy. And Angel, I actually want to hear what you have to say as a provider. What happens when you are overcome with an emotion for a person and you really want to make sure that you're connecting on that level? How do you do it from a place to where the person doesn't feel like a puppy, or like, oh, like, how do you do it to where you're really honoring this person?
Yeah, that is definitely the question. And I think to your point, it's about seeing someone as a full person, right? Nobody is just the worst thing that they've gone through, or their most traumatic experience. There's so much more in a person's life, and I think as a service provider, like honoring that there are some things where you can tell someone, that was really terrible. You didn't deserve to go through that. And they also have things in their life that they're excited for, whether it's their children or their family or things that are going on. I think as a service provider, it's about respecting the whole of someone. And I think people can sense when, you only care about one aspect of their life. If you only want to talk about one aspect of their life, people can get a sense of that rather than trying to get to know them as a person. Like, how do they process information? What do they believe? What are their values? Like, I think really trying to connect with people in the core of their being, like, what do people value? What are their principles? What is moving people to do things? What are people's, goals? What drives them? I think helps to see people as a whole person instead of just, oh, they went through that terrible thing and now, all the other experiences in their life didn't really affect them as much as this one thing that, as service providers, we tend to hyper focus on, right? When we do intakes, we only want to know about the one instance. When we're doing the counseling, we're just wanting to unpack this one thing that's going on in your case, and there's just so much more to people than that. And people can tell when you have an interest in their full selves versus just whatever it is that they're in front of you for.
I have a quick question. So Marissa, I see another point to this. Is it it's saying, are you saying that specifically with interactions with law enforcement or service provider, like agency? Like I'm trying to understand correctly, like who we're asking this about. So I'll wait for that to see if we're talking specific to provider or to law enforcement. Robin, would you like to add?
Only thing I was just wanting to add to it is just when you are approaching someone who is in that situation, is, you know, you can tell the difference between someone who's actually there to help you and someone who actually feel like it's a pity for you. I know one instance when I was incarcerated and we were going to this group. And it was ladies that we knew come from a fortunate area within Atlanta, and nobody really took them as someone who was really serious about helping us. It was more like we thought, oh, these women are just here because they have nothing to do at the time. They're housewives and they don't really care about who we really are. We're just like a project. So not making feel like making people feel like they're a project or something to do because you don't have anything else to do. And when we actually connected with these women and talked to these women, we realized that that wasn't the case at all. So, but we just wanted to know that, let people know that in the beginning, when you're feeling like you're made a project or it's just something that you're not, or this is just like a job for you, we actually feel the difference. We know the difference between somebody who really cared and really put in the work versus that.
Thank you. And so Marissa did put a follow-up to that it was a survivor talking about law enforcement interactions. I don't think that law enforcement knows how to properly handle, and I don't even think that law enforcement should be stepping into a lot of these things. It should be people in the community, social workers in the community, people who have been trained to handle certain situations. And I feel like they turn everything over to law enforcement, and I don't believe that they have the proper training to deal with survivors or situations where mediation is required, because we've seen them come out and both people are going to jail. This is supposed to be a mediating situation. You're here to mediate, or people are now dead because they didn't handle the situation properly. So when it comes to law enforcement, that's kind of a touchy subject, because I just don't think that they're being trained properly to do what's needed to do to actually heal our communities. And so we have one final question that I'm going to bring up, you guys, from Monica Flores. Emotional labor is the most taxing, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and undervalued, underpaid survivor-led work. And that is true. I feel like a lot of times we are exploited, or we get to the point where we start to exploit ourselves, especially like people who are survivors of human trafficking, people who have been in the life. Like once you have grown accustomed to being exploited, and then you come into a work that does a lot of exploiting its people, you start to exploit yourself, because they want you to tell your story. They want you to relive your trauma. They want to pay you to do this, pay you to do that, pay you to do this. And a lot of times it's uncomfortable stuff. And when you're in the life, I mean, you're having sex with people for money, which is uncomfortable as well. So to me, like, there's no difference in the two. And so it sucks, because emotional labor is taxing. And if you haven't done the work on yourself to really like know who you are and know your why and how you're getting up and how you're showing up, it can tax you. And like another thing we don't talk about in this work is depression, and how a lot of people who are doing this work have severe depression. They want to call it a burnout, but it's depression. And so I think that it's something that we really need to talk about more. How are we paying our people that are leading this movement, especially when these are multi-million-dollar organizations? Sorry, you guys, that's my alarm. How are we paying people that are bringing in the money to these organizations, and how are we making sure that we are taking care of these people? Like, I work for another organization part-time called Cash, and we have therapy. Like, they make sure that we have therapy. How many organizations are providing therapy for their people? That's my take on it. I don't know, Robin, if you want to add to that, or Amy, you want to add to that?
I definitely do. For us, a lot of times what I found out is when people ask us for our story, we tell people we will give you our story, but we do require to provide counseling afterwards, because us telling our story over and over is opening up a lot of wounds. For people, when we are membership based, when people ask for people that's been in certain jails and want to come tell stories, that has always been a requirement from Women on the Rise. And then also for us that do this work, to me, it is taxing, and it's trauma, and we are reliving our lives and our stories every day by fighting this work. And but we do look at it as people saying, I'm burnt out, I need some time. And I'm learning that that's why self-care is so important. I've always been a workaholic type, but in this line of work, you can't do that and not take some time for self-care, self-reflection. Grounding yourself, I've learned, is so important. And I have to realize a lot of times when I'm telling my story of what happened to me inside prison, I have to remind myself I'm not there. It becomes emotional. I've only been home for 2.5 years, and it does still bubble up within inside of me. But I've seen people that's been home 10 plus years that tell their story and they still get emotional about it. Because when you do this work, you have to relive it. And so you can never close that door and hoping to one day permanently close it. You have to remember what you go through every day, or what you went through every day, to continue this fight and to continue to do the things that you have to do to make some change within it.
Angela, why don't you go ahead and close us out?
Oh, will do. I don't have much to add, but just that what Robin was saying about self-care and care, community care is so important. And I think that that's something that I've had to learn in this work, especially doing advocacy work or participatory defense. Like, the group really has to hold there has to be space, because, life is messy, right? And especially, I can speak personally, in the Black community, even when folks come out, that's not the end, right? We're always having our communities are surveilled, or police show up at family functions, or, barge into people's buildings. There's still, these day-to-day interactions that folks who come from marginalized communities have to deal with. And that is why the self-care and the community care is so important, because people can be so easily triggered, especially like for me being based in New York, NYPD is literally everywhere. So folks who have traumas around law enforcement, right? There needs to be space. There needs to be other advocates, other survivors who are able to hold all that we all have been through and all that we all experience, because it can be very, very isolating, and it is taxing. And without that, we can't sustain the work that we do.
Thank you, Angel and Robin. I appreciate sharing this platform with you guys. I think that the work that we do as survivor as well as service provider together is important, because it takes us all, like you said earlier, Angel, and we can't do one without the other. Like, I can't advocate without a person that's here to help me and who's also my advocate as well. So thank you guys. I appreciate sharing this time with you guys. And I hope we were able to educate, and there's more work to be done, and hopefully we can do it hand in hand. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Sydney, who is one of the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We've been working side by side for the last few years as well. And so, Sydney, thank you for all the work you've done and all the mornings you showed up, and I appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. I am so excited to be here. I must say, we have been working on this for a very, very long time together. And so for us to be at this point where we are able to share with all of you this incredible curriculum is incredibly exciting. So I just thank you all for joining, and all of the wonderful and thoughtful comments that are bubbling up in the chat. So I am Sydney McKinney. My pronouns are she, her. I am based in Brooklyn, New York, on Lenape and Canarsie land. I am the executive director of the National Black Women's Justice Institute, which is a nonprofit research, policy, and capacity building organization that's working to end the systemic criminalization and punishment of Black women and girls. So after that incredible discussion, We're now going to dive into the curriculum a little bit. So just for grounding, our intention was to create a curriculum for victim service providers and other stakeholders who work directly with formerly and currently incarcerated women, girls, and gender expansive people. We wanted to create a curriculum that centers the voices and experiences and expertise of formerly incarcerated people. And that is so important. And I hope you understand just how important that was for us based on the conversation that we just had with our subject matter experts, who really drove the ship as far as the development of the curriculum, not just from, what are the main issues and areas we need to elevate, but even down to what are the specific activities and exercises. So I really want to thank everyone who participated, because this curriculum is a joint project that we couldn't have done without everyone who was on this team. So the curriculum is divided into 3 main sections. The first section walks people through what you need to know when you are working with formerly incarcerated survivors of gender-based violence. So it really does give a background on how race and gender impact people's trajectories into penal systems and carceral systems and spaces, as well as the different kinds of ways in which gender-based violence is a main driver. And so really wanting to connect for people the intersection of criminalization and gender-based violence. Then we move into a section that is really inspired by, as what you heard from April, creating a heart condition. I actually remember the day when we were thinking about this, and April used that term, and we were like, yes, that's exactly it. And so you heard a little bit about what that means. It's really about how service providers show up. That they need to show up in a way that is empathetic, trauma-informed, and supportive of formerly incarcerated survivors. We also really want people to understand their role in existing power dynamics. We cannot deny that our victim service field and the landscape of services is often intertwined with our criminal legal system. And so we really want providers in this section to understand how their work sometimes creates these power dynamics that may make people feel like they cannot seek or access services. We also really wanted people to build an awareness of what their personal biases are and how their biases might shape their treatment and engagement with formerly incarcerated survivors. And then in the final section, we wanted to share with providers and impart with them best practices for working with formerly incarcerated survivors. So those were really the 3 main objectives, and that's really kind of the path that people will take as they move through the curriculum. Now we're going to have a little conversation that looks at a few specific activities and really engage with Angel and Robin around why those activities and what was our aim and what are our goals for providers. So I'll let them come back up on the screen. There you guys are. Hi. So great to be with you. So first, as I said, thank you guys so much, because we couldn't have created this curriculum without all of the brilliance that you have brought to this work. The first activity that we're going to talk about is the power and control wheel, which I believe we have several providers on the call. So this power and control wheel is probably quite familiar to you. And that was one of the intentions. This power and control wheel, we kind of revamped it though. And the idea is to help service providers really understand their role and participation in systems that exert coercive control over the lives of formerly incarcerated survivors, both before their incarceration, during, and after. So first, I will jump to you, Robin. Why do you think it is important for us to have the power and control activity in this curriculum? And what are you hoping that providers get out of this activity?
Okay, and what I feel like is this, when you are a survivor, you have your power taken from you. So when people realize that you do still have the power within you and that somebody else is recognizing that, it makes them be more open to be able to do things and be more open to be able to do any activity when they realize that this is not taking away your power, not putting you in a certain position and not making you feel any particular type of way. That's one thing that when you're incarcerated is they to do for you is they take away your power. And so to be able to know that you are in control and that you do have the power and this is to help you, that to me is what helped people open up to be able to do this activity.
Thank you. Angel, how about you? Why do you think that this activity is important? And what do you hope people get out of it?
I definitely agree with Rob, and I also hope that service providers can learn to see the way that the system itself is an abuser to survivors in a way, taking away people's autonomy, taking away people's control of their own lives, like literally isolating people. So I hope that people can like really, really take a deeper look at power and control and think of what that might look like, not just in an individual relationship, but on a more systemic institutional level.
Thank you. And I know we have providers on the call. So if you have any experiences that you feel like are relevant that you want to drop in the chat, please do. Because I do recall that when we were creating this, we were really thinking about the ways in which the service providers have to work with law enforcement, that we know sometimes that people's access to services is dependent on supporting cases. And so there is this direct relationship that exists that I think we don't always talk about or really consider about how that might impact how people's willingness, openness, or comfort with accessing services. So if you have any of those experiences as a formerly incarcerated survivor or as a service provider that you feel comfortable sharing, please do, because we know that this is real. So the next activity that we will talk about is we call it the scenarios activity. When we were creating it, we were thinking about how do we help service providers understand kind of the myriad challenges that people encounter as they return home, and this feeling that some people can have around their access to services really being dependent on chance. Did I show up on the right day? Did I happen to get a probation officer who is nice? Right, like that it is just like a flip of the coin, rather than folks feeling like they have control over all of the things that they are dealing with when they come home. So this is a cool activity. When we do it virtually, there'll actually be a card flip that happens where it'll be like housing. I think there's a flip of 50-50. You get housing or you don't get housing. You get a job or you don't, right? So it's like kind of this flipping of a coin as far as the options, and then talking through what does this mean for a formerly incarcerated survivor and their experience. Angel, talk to me about why you think that this activity is important, and what do you think it helps to elevate for providers about the experience of returning home?
I definitely think one thing that this activity we hope that it can highlight and elevate is just how for lack of a better term, like arbitrary, a lot of obstacles that people who are coming home face can be. A lot of people have so much control over your life, and it could be a matter of like if they're having a bad day, that determines whether or not you get access to something or whether or not you're able to do something that you need to do. And everybody has different experiences, and folks have different experiences, not because some people are inherently smarter or better than other people, or they know things that other people don't know, but it is because there's just so many things there's so many steps that need to happen for someone to really comfortably integrate themselves back into their community. And there's so many things that can go wrong within each of those steps that folks have to then navigate on the spot after, again, doing time for so long or not having access to resources for so long. And so what we really hoped that it elevated and showed to service providers was that it's not easy, which of course we all know, but that even as much as you think it's not easy, like it's hard and things are arbitrary, and you might luck up and end up with this thing, or you might luck out and end up with another thing. And so we really wanted people to be able to see just how up in the air things are for people when they come home, and the different things that they might be exposed to or have to deal with, based off things that are just completely out of their control.
Robin, I see you nodding. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, what I wanted to add was to recognize that there will be frustration when people come home, such as myself. I was one of the lucky ones when it came to like having the probation officer that was understanding, but I had barriers with housing. And it's like, no matter what you do, you could have the money to do it, you can have the job to do it, but because of that background, you have these barriers that you might not have had before. A lot of people, when we come home, we have all these hopes and dreams of, I'm going to get my life together, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, because I'm not going to go back into that situation. But then when these barriers hit you, people get very frustrated, and then a lot of them throw their hands up. And so that's one reason that we found that we offer with Women on the Rise is a membership group. We call it Girl Talk 101. I'm actually missing right now. But what we do is we just really have like a girl talk. We get on there and say, hey, what problems are y'all going to? What do y'all want to talk about? Because a lot of times you have a family that love you, but they don't understand. But here we all are formerly incarcerated. So we know what you're going through, and we know how to help you get through it. We might even have some resources that we tried that worked for us. We pass them on to each other. So my whole thing is just recognizing that there will be frustration. And there will be times that people want to give up, and you have to, dig deep in them and find out how you can overcome what they go through.
Thank you so much. One of the things that both of you said that had me thinking is, one of the things we want folks to understand is that the process of kind of returning home and the experience of coming through and healing from the trauma that you experienced prior to incarceration and during incarceration, that's not a linear process, right? And that all of these different factors that impact a person's life impact the trauma and how they are managing their trauma and the extent to which they are able to heal. And sometimes, and we heard this in some of the listening sessions we held, that providers don't always understand that they're dealing with the thing that's in front of them, not always thinking about the other factors that are impacting a person, and not always recognizing that, Sydney is having a bad day because of the housing challenge that she's dealing with. And that is why she's yelling at you right now. And that people need to be understanding of just like the complexity of issues that are impacting a person's life as they're returning home. We also have within this curriculum a letter to providers that is written by one of our subject matter experts, Kimmy, who is not able to be here today, but she wrote this, and it's informing providers about what it is like the first 30 days after being released from incarceration. And so much of what Robin and Angel shared are things that she elevated. So we really, in addition to having these activities that help you kind of experience kind of the challenges, we also wanted to insert the voices of our subject matter experts to tell you exactly what that experience is like from their own lived experience. The next activity that I want to highlight for folks is the advocacy through healing activity. So I think many of us can agree that advocacy is incredibly powerful and can have a healing effect. So we wanted to make sure that as part of this curriculum, we created an opportunity for providers to really explore and think about how advocacy can support the formerly incarcerated survivors that they work with. So this activity has pictures and questions, and you can see some of these pictures on the screen. And I have to make my Zoom a little bigger. I think you can see all of the joy and the power that is exuded in each of the people that is represented in these pictures. So Robin, talk to me about why you think it's important for us to have an exercise around advocacy as a tool for healing.
I think it gives them the idea of the possibilities. When you come home, you have all of these barriers and things that that hinder you from doing the things that you have in your head that you've been praying for years to achieve. And anytime that you have something that stands in the way, you get to thinking, is this possible? Is things that I'm going through and the dreams that I had and me getting over this incarceration, is it possible? So when you have, people that you see that have succeeded, or when you are going through the healing process, when you're feeling like you can make it through that, it gives you hope to know that this is not something that it's a stumbling block, but it's not something that can't be overcame. So that's why I think it's very important to show them the possibility of what you can get through just by having the help to get through the barriers that stop you from getting there.
And Angel, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes. I also think that I think we spoke earlier about like a lot of folks who have to kind of use emotional labor and spill their traumas out in order to get sympathy from these systems. But I think the flip side of that is there are a lot of people who want to tell their story and they want to talk about what happened to them and they want to speak out against the systems that they've suffered from. And I think that advocacy, participatory defense, campaigns are a great way for people to do that. And I think something especially that survivors are told constantly is that, nobody cares about them. And I think that's what the system tries to tell folks when they lock folks away. Nobody cares about you, society, nobody. And to be able to come into a community where folks are advocating alongside you, folks are passionate about issues, folks are passionate about the things that you have gone through. I think for a lot of people, it does create a community and it shows that there are people that care. There are people who can hear about what you've gone through. And it's not that they've been living their lives and they're like, well, whoever's going through that, that's what they deserve, but they genuinely don't know. And I think for a lot of people that can be empowering, that they get to tell their story. It's not the DA who's painting you a type of way, or the judge who gets to tell, who gets to say who you are, or parole board or whoever. You get to frame who you are and your story, and there's a community of people who are eager to lift that story up, to fight against these systems with you. And I think that can really help for people in healing. I think many of us have heard the phrase that you can't heal in isolation. And I think that the advocacy community is a great place for people to reclaim their stories and speak out against their systemic abusers.
Thank you. And what you said also makes me think about the point that you made early on about autonomy, right? That for formerly incarcerated survivors, their autonomy and their control over their bodies, their selves has been taken away. And advocacy is a way to reclaim power, right? And to reclaim the control. And so another reason why it is so important and can be so valuable to the healing process. So I just want to thank you all so much for engaging in this conversation with me about our curriculum that we created. There is so much more. I just need everyone to know that those are only 4 of several amazing activities that we are incredibly proud of. And we just really wanted to, in this section of this webinar, give you a quick overview and highlight of some of the activities that we have created. But we look forward to you looking through it and sharing your feedback on this. And it's work that we are incredibly proud of. So I am passing it to Robin. You are going to take on the next section, Robin.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we'll just open it up for Q&A section. I'm looking in the chat and I don't see any questions, and maybe if I can, okay, I see that was answered. But does anyone have any questions you want to put in the chat, so you want to discuss, or about anything we've talked about since the beginning, this webinar? Or did we do such an awesome job you don't have any questions? It's even better. I don't see any hands raised. Okay, well, Samantha, I'm not seeing anyone has any questions, so I guess turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So I have the ultimate honor of closing us out today. We are wrapping a little bit early, and I hope that gives you all a few minutes left in your day. If you could, we have a survey that we would love for you all to fill out. It'll come up once we close out the webinar, and I'd like to thank our panelists, the subject matter experts that couldn't join us today, everyone on this Love Project team. It's been an incredible effort over the last few years. And it has, we've been able to develop a really beautiful community in this process, and it extends to all of our work going outwards. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to everyone who participated in our discussions today, everyone who joined in the chat. And we will have the curriculum and other resources available on the National Crittenton website, and we'll be sending this out along with the slides likely next week. So feel free to reach out if you need to connect. Thank you so much, everyone.